to Leaders of Tomorrow, the only show on Indian television where you, the MSME, get center stage. This is ETNA's special daily initiative for MSMEs and entrepreneurs to give them the opportunity to be front and center in every industry and area that matters to you. Tonight on our show, we bring you snippets of an event and panel discussion that we did in Indore earlier on the theme of urbanization, how MSMEs can capitalize and contribute. We do 20 such roadshows pan-India to reach every corner of the country and speak directly with you, the MSME. My colleague Pooja Jain moderated the panel discussion. Take a look.
Well, Rishikesh, I'd like to start the conversation with you. When we talk about Indore, does Indore provide a political stability that helps fuel economic growth? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Indore is certainly one of the very conducive environments for entrepreneurship and business in India. There's a lot of evidence in that in the way the MSME sector has grown in Indore over the years. I think it's located just right. You know, it's close to the capital of Indore, of MP, but it's not the capital of MP. So it's about, just 3 hours away, enough so that you can interact with the policy makers and the government, but far enough away so that the government is not too much into business. Just the right location to have it sort of insulated from too much negative political influence, but to have the advantages of government.
All right, and if we were to sort of take a look at that through the lens of the startup ecosystem here, and Atul, my next question is to you. There's no shortage of IT talent. There's something in the order of 15,000 IT professionals in Indore that are stationed across 300 plus tech-enabled startups. But numbers do not tell the entire story. So how structured, how organized is this sector ultimately?
So actually, since last decade, Indore was into the field of startups. Graduated from Indore, came back, started up companies. What I had observed that Indore was lacking up with the ecosystems. So as I being in the academics, and when my student went out, they worked for a year or 2 or 3 or 5 and they come back to Indore, they were not finding an appropriate infrastructure and ecosystem to develop themselves. And we as an educator and we as an Indoreans have a moral duty towards the society to get these children as the startups to grow. And that motivated me to start up Indore Entrepreneur Network in 2013. We started with 5 startups and it's grown up to now, I probably can say, it's grown up to now 500 plus startups in the ecosystem. And this is a volunteer service we are doing for all the startups. And it is a very happy evening to see that Indore has grown to an entrepreneurial map of country.
Taking a look at this startup ecosystem that's unique to Indore, what's going for it and what's working against it? VP, I'd like to pose that question to you.
You see, first of all, I would say that it is not a batch process that you have step 1 and then step 2 and then step 3. You might have a lot of IT students here or IT, human resource here. But then capital also is required at the same time. You might have these two, but then incubation centers and accelerators are not there. So as such, it's an entire ecosystem. It's a chicken and egg story. What comes first? Possibly the entire ecosystem has to be developed. Now, who takes that initiative? It has to be the state here at the very first start. Then people actually get attracted. MSMEs, they come up. And when MSMEs come up, opportunities of employment, they come up. And then it fires each and every engine out here. So the basic point is, the state has to create a kind of infrastructure where it has to take the lead and the private then immediately comes in and participates. That's my take on it.
And Akshay, do you share that same school of thought? And if so, what role does government policy play in making this happen?
Yeah, actually, government policies are making a lot of difference in the sectors right now. Just like in Indore, government has recently launched incubation center with the name of Region. So that's the first and most initial initiative that government is taking for the startups. And lot of startups face lots of problems. Just like for initial steps, they don't have the infrastructure to sit up and discuss their ideas with their teams. So in the government sector, if they are providing you the incubation center and all those things. So from my own experience, just like we were sitting on a local tea stalls with my team to discuss about the ideas, and we don't have the money to invest in our own office. So basically, if we are going to have such kind of facilities in Indore, so that will basically add up in the growth of Indore. That's from my side.
Well, Animesh, I'd love to bring you in here. So the counter argument here is, for example, if we were to look at auto rickshaw aggregators, right? If we were to look at, companies such as Dhanno, companies such as, Telerickshaw, which you will have the opportunity to potentially partner with, they're providing competition at the national level to aggregators such as Jugnu. So that said, the local players are obviously a thorn in the side of the national larger players. So what does that tell you about the startup ecosystem here and where it's headed?
So there are two aspects of it. Indore as a city has been a test bed for decades. So companies or products, they have chosen Indore to run for the first time to see the viability of their product. So Indoreans in general are rather more risk-taking. Second is the demographic variety that we have here actually puts us in a very sweet spot where we have different sort of people here. So you can find people from South India, North India, East, West, everywhere. So you can actually assess the test. So the local players have the advantage of this market. And second, being an education hub, being sort of a center and same demographic variety, we have people who can contribute towards making these products happen. So local players have this advantage. If they execute it right, they can definitely be a thorn in any national player.
Now, you make a fascinating point about Indore being an idea lab of sorts, but what I want to understand is what makes it an idea lab, and this extends well outside the tech sector. So, for example, if we were to look at Airtel, if we were to look at even PVR Gold with its launch of these plush, sofa-oriented cinemas, all of these services were initially launched in Indore before they made their way across the country. So, Rishikesh, what is it about Indore that makes it a desirable litmus test, an accurate test target market?
Well, I think Animesh already mentioned the fact that Indore is quite a cosmopolitan city with people from many parts of the country. But more than that, I think what's important is Indoreans are willing to experiment. They're willing to try out new things. So if you want to launch a new product or service, you need a market where you're likely to find receptive people. And that's where I think the kind of adventurous and, the sort of experimental orientation of the Indore public really makes it an ideal place to try out new things.
And Atul, that's of course extended to, even food and beverage. For example, if we are to look at Barbecue Nation, and Barbecue Nation today is a 1,000 crore national chain restaurant. And it's not a very well-known fact, but that started from Indore's Sayaji Hotel. How do you respond to observations such as that?
It's not only about food. It's in technology also. If you talk about Indore has its name. Recently, state government had supported YU India, which is a patented product into the air cooling systems. So it's not only food. As I want to say that entrepreneurship is inbred in the air, and people are innovative. And as people are innovative, the entire audience in the market is innovative, and they like to be in an innovative era.
Time for a break. On the other side, we'll continue bringing you the highlights out of that event in Indore. Highlights out of a panel discussion that the team from Leaders of Tomorrow did in Indore on the theme of urbanization, how MSMEs can capitalize and contribute. Take a look.
A lot of top talent as they graduate and enter the workforce, many times they inherit managers that don't share that mindset. So how is that dynamic? How is that conflict managed? And I'd love to pose that question to you. So as someone enters the workforce and they have a boss who doesn't believe or doesn't have that innovative bench, how can someone young and talented bridge that gap?
That's a very tricky question. I have never been in that situation myself. But I would assume if I were to have such a boss, where the boss is not very receptive to my ideas, then probably I would start to do some workaround wherein instead of just pitching him the idea, I would rather pitch him a working version of it or show a competitive example outside, maybe in India or outside India, and give him some data to convince him, and then walk the way forward from there. Because a lot of people are not willing to receive new ideas because they are not well informed about the change which is happening around them. So they're too much into them, probably because they're inside the box. So you have to show them the picture which is outside the box.
Excellent. And to build on that, Akshay, like for example, if we were to take a look at 4G Wi-Fi, in India it's a luxury perhaps, and outside of India, especially in the more developed countries, it's almost a basic expectation. Right? So how does consumer behavior, how do consumer expectations change, and how do you adjust your business model accordingly?
The thing is that the basic thing of sustaining is adaptation. So basically, if you are talking about the outside India, there means that's a 4G is a basic thing, and in India 4G is a charm for the peoples and all those things. So the first of thing we need to understand all those things is just like we are developing country. So if we are in the ecosystem of a developing country, we just knows the need to know the art of adjustment and adaptations. So just like I have an example, just like you need to know about the market and adaptation. Just like in 2000, a startup came up in the Silicon Valley. That's about online video channel, but it's failed. But after 3 years of that, one startup came up with the name of YouTube, and now everyone knows it. So the only thing is that that startup was coming up before the time, so they don't have the time to sustain and adopt the thing. If they means people were not aware of online video streaming and all those things. They don't have the internet connection to stream the videos online. But at that moment they were prior to time, and they was not being able to adopt that situation at that scenario. So we need to adopt the things. We need to learn about the market, and we need to change ourselves.
Well, Akshay's point brings us back to Indore, and Indore having this iterative feedback loop that makes the consumer database that's Indorean very valuable to some of these larger and smaller players. So, VP, is that simply a coincidence, or has that been natured and nurtured in a latent way that we just have not paid attention to?
You're talking about the DNA of Indore per se? Well, that's the reason I'm here. I mean, I came here and I just became an Indorian, and I love to be and I take pride in being now, settling myself out here. So this seems to be inherent. It was inherent. It was spoken in olden times, कि आपको अगर मालवा का कुछ सेवन करना है तो वहाँ जाना पड़ेगा. Am I correct? That was what the scene was, which is what I find. And believe me, I'm hugely bullish, at least on this part of the geography now, across India. If at all somebody has to question that Indore doesn't have still the attributes required for a huge amount of urbanization or a huge amount of progress, my counter question to that person would be that the other cities which have grown now, whether it is Hyderabad, Bangalore, Pune, or even Mumbai and all those places, or even NCR, they have become so large and so huge that they are dying because of their own weight. You see, there is something known as a natural law which will really affect everyone. That's the reason dinosaurs are not there today. So the point is, because if somebody tells me that Indore doesn't have still the attributes, I would say that leave that side. It's just because the other cities have lost the attribute, Indore is going to grow. And GST came in.
There are both, I think you put the point quite well, but there are both aggregation benefits and aggregation disadvantages. What we are beginning to see now in some of the big cities is certainly the disadvantages. But it's quite amazing, right? Animesh mentioned that he has a team working in Bangalore. Bangalore traffic is horrendous. The other day it took me 3.5 hours to get to the airport. Yet there's still people moving businesses there. There are people starting up there. So at times, even though there are those serious disadvantages.
So I fully accept what you say, but you just open up the chapter that if the guy is somewhere nearby, maybe Indore, he would love to come here. Only thing is you show him the opportunity. And that's where I'm telling you, MSME, I am hugely bullish. Let's look at records. Most of the developed nations, I do not know if you've gone into the records, most of the developed nations, they have 50% of the GDP contributed by MSMEs. Whereas in India, it is just patently, so abysmally low, 8%. And MSME is almost employing 25% of the working population of India. So 8% vis-a-vis 50. I'm not talking about developed nations. Let's not look at that big number, but we need to progress. And maybe I think the financial budget talks about this number of 8% going up to almost about 20%, and for which there is a very strong deliberation going on of reducing the interest rates, which is what I just now mentioned. There's a subsidized program and a thought going on. Second is a compulsory procurement from MSME by government departments. And as we all know, government is going to come in big way into spending. And various other things, cluster kind of stuff which is going to be done. So you'll be actually seeing maybe a common hall, a conference hall, a common R&D, a common facility, for most of the MSMEs. So there will be a cluster. So all that if I put together, and as I told you again and again, GST, except you leave aside the forms and quarterly and monthly numbers and forms that you have to fill up and the hassle that you're going through, which is just temporary, believe me, everything looks rosy to me.
But Indore has to ride at least one wave. That's a problem, Mr. Inani. See, just look back. I remember, I was not in Indore at that time, but in the 1980s, I used to read articles which said that Pithampur is going to become the Detroit of India. Now, many more Detroits have formed, but Pithampur did not become that Detroit. It's certainly an important cluster, but it never became Detroit. Similarly, you have the IT wave in the 90s, and you have companies like Infosys, which really made Bangalore. Somehow there's one of these waves, we have to ride it and, really make it happen.
So it still happens to be a place where you have IIM and IIT?
Yeah. Don't depend only on IIM and IIT. I would put my money on the entrepreneurs.
It still happens to be a place where we have such kind of experimenting people. And believe me, I always would want to be on the optimistic side. That gives you a feeling of waking up the next day and really looking out for some kind of benefit.
Even I, sir, sorry, but I endorse Mr. Inani.
I'm optimistic too. All I'm telling you is that you have to create a strong set of enterprises around one particular business or one particular domain. You have to be able to brand the city around that.
Correct.
I mean, today what is Indore's branding outside? It's a good branding. It's all about food and snacks and all that. That's what people think of first. But that's a nice thing to do, but that's not going to drive a lot of, the next wave of entrepreneurship. So you have to figure out what is that next thing that's going to make a difference and find a way of driving that.
Sir, in the same course of action, Mr. Inani, you will agree that the government of state of Madhya Pradesh has started that Namkeen cluster, and where the snack manufacturing is coming up. Earlier, we are known for textiles in Indore, and after that, pharma sector, and after that, automobile. Automobile somehow had not worked, but still we have John Deere as a 100% export-oriented.
I would disagree here.
Yeah.
Eicher Motors has plant nowhere else except, MP Devas and all that. Enfield is a two-wheeler thing which they bought it over in Chennai. But otherwise, whenever you speak to the main man, Mr. Vinod Agarwal, he will always say, why do I have to expand? I have power here, I have people here. I mean, why should I go out? That's what you get to hear, So the point is, automobile is there, and in any case, cotton because this is cotton. Cotton prices at one point in time were ruled by Indore, the world over. I mean, that's what I'm told. 20 years back when I came.
Yeah, you have to find the next secret sauce, Mr. Inani.
Sir, there have been many companies who have had multiple outlets and multiple stores. But from Indore, I have not seen many companies who have gone towards India. Everyone in India is knowing that company which has started from Indore. So where is Indore missing, and how can Swan Angel help them?
Well, let me help you. I first of all correct you. Barbecue Nation is one such enterprise.
Yeah.
And you have, of course, Eicher Motors, the biggest success story in the last 10-15 years, growing from just paltry, what you call about 3 to 4,000 crore market cap to 95,000 crore market cap in just flat 10 years. I happen to work in Eicher, and that's how I landed here. So believe me, not one. There are so many stories. And of course, tech, as people on this panel have very much said, that we do have this technological constraint just because the ecosystem did not develop that time. And it's never late.
Startups do need the people to work upon the technology. So we are lacking on that. Thus, government is taking something forward for that. That I have inquired on Google that still we are not having that Prince 2 and that project management courses. No one is providing them to the young students of engineering.
If you go into IT and other domains, we are actually at least we have some bucket which tier 2 cities of India does not have. Indore had missed the bus, as rightly said by the sir. And today, if you talk about IT, Indore is having DXC Technologies, which is world's on the top-notch IT companies. And we have now Infosys also, we have TCS also. And this small ignition, in next 5 years, just see, Indore is going to be the IT hub center of country also.
Mr. Atul, let me reframe this. Again and again we say we missed the bus or we missed the train or whatever it is. We haven't missed the bus. We are going to take the next bus. Let's put it this way, please.
Actually, I've been approached recently by one of the billionaire investors outside country. So I have a bit tricky question from you. If I'm approached by somebody outside the country and by somebody within Indore, then whom should I go with?
So point is, whoever is giving you money, you have not to be possibly right now looking at the person. First look at the commercials. The commercials which are suiting you the best, they have to be valued first of all. Then behind the commercials, if at all any of any of the person is providing you some kind of technical support, or there is some kind of a sync in your business happening with some gentleman, then of course he carries a plus point. But if both remain to be a passive investor, it boils down to the commercial terms. That's about it.
That wraps up tonight's episode of Leaders of Tomorrow. If you have any questions for us, email us at leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com. If you want to know which other city we're heading to next, tweet at me at Sunand_J or LOT_ET now, or leave your comments on our Facebook page, Leaders of Tomorrow and ET now. You can also call us on that number you see on your screen. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good night.